This chunk of metal held the authority for nearly every measurement of weight you've ever made, from your bathroom scale to the recipes you weigh when cooking. This is the International Prototype Kilogram, made of iridium and platinum and locked in an underground vault in Paris. Since its creation in 1889, it held the world's definition of what a kilogram was. To achieve that, copies of the IPK had to be distributed across the world, and every country had to create its own reference as closely as possible. This is important because the prototype and other metrological units are the bedrock of science, connecting the present value of those units to their past values. Therefore, the kilogram from 1889 must be the same as the kilogram now. Without it, there's nothing to refer to, and it would be hard to know whether the measurement we made in the past is really a kilogram. People would have to create a new standard, and everything would have to be recalibrated and rewritten. The kilogram is one of our many efforts to standardize reality, but the history of standardization goes back a long time. Even before the first proper standards, the Bible already demanded a life of justice and order regarding measuring length and weight, and this was around 1000 BC. However, one of the more serious attempts to create standards dates back to the creation of the metric system during the French Revolution. During this time, the ideology of liberty, equality, and fraternity was at an all-time high. The revolutionaries wanted to create units for all men for all time, and that was the aim of the metric system, to liberate the people from the inconsistent and confusing weights and measures of the ancien regime. They hoped that a shared system of weights and measures would unite the world, as it allowed the free exchange of information. At the time, one unit of measurement, a king's foot, was based on, well, the king's foot. The king's standards were not accessible to all men and were widely abused. For example, a lieu in Beauce was 3.268 km, but in Provence, it was 5.849 km. The revolutionaries wanted to overturn the system's grip on society. They wanted something everyone could access rather than an artifact used to measure the king's foot. That gave birth to the metric system, shifting the authority of measurement away from the monarchy and placing it on natural systems which everyone could access. For example, the kilogram was originally based on the mass of 1 liter of water at 4 degrees Celsius, while the meter was painstakingly measured by hand during a 7-year journey across the continent to be 1/10 millionth of the distance between the North Pole and the equator through Paris. This meant that if any country wanted to know the meter, they could theoretically measure it themselves. Over the next century, the metric system was adopted by more countries and new units were added. Today, out of the 195 countries in the world, only 3 countries still use the outdated imperial system: the United States, Liberia, and Myanmar. The creation of standards or units of measurement is one attempt at trying to make sense of whatever reality is. Basically, we just made up a definition and asked everyone to agree on it. In this case, the kilogram. We defined the kilogram, showed how to measure it, and created an artifact of it. And everyone has to share and agree on this same slice of reality. We do the same with language too. Language is a communication tool with others, and the shared nature of language means that the user has to share the same concept of their reality with other users. Language describes the worlds outside our own, and we share it with the inner world of another person. Due to the communal nature of language, everyone has to agree on the same features of the external world, things like color, space, objects, and events, even if they perceive it differently. Thank God we have many different languages in the world, because we can compare and see the differences in how speakers of different languages engage with their external world and describe events. For example, English speakers like to use verbs that describe motion in terms of its manner, such as skip, walk, and run, but Greek speakers tend to refer to its path, like approach, ascend, or pass. When talking about color, Russian speakers divide blue into two categories, lighter blue and darker blue, because they have no single word for the various shades of blue like English speakers. Due to this, different languages highlight or augment different segments of the external world while simultaneously de-emphasizing others. Due to this, it's easy to manipulate people's experiences using language. For example, if you serve the same food to people but give it different names, they like the one with the more delicious sounding name, like scrumptious and juicy, even though the food is exactly the same. Since language affects the same areas in the brain responsible for perception and action, it's no surprise that words can have a real effect on our experiences of the world. Standardization also comes in the form of religion, as it highly influences our lives. Many aspects of life are difficult to understand, and some people seek comfort and explanations for the mysteries of life and death that science can offer from religion. Since religion reinforces social unity and stability, it forces us to accept the same set of beliefs. Because of that, it functions as an agent of social control, order, and standardization. Religions tell you what to believe, how to behave, what morality is, what will happen in the afterlife, and how to be a good person. The 10 Commandments in the Judeo-Christian tradition are perhaps the most famous set of rules for moral behavior. To some people, religious rituals and ceremonies bring individuals so closely and intensely together that they can involve crying, laughing, screaming, trance-like conditions, a feeling of oneness with those around them, and other emotional and psychological states. It can be a transformative experience for some. After all, in a world where we struggle to be understood and where everything is so variable and messy, isn't it nice to be recognized and accepted? To follow certain rules and standards that have been established for hundreds of years without questioning whether what you're doing is wrong. That's what makes it appealing. It provides comfort in times of distress, and religious people are usually happier and tend to live longer than those who aren't religious. If it standardizes every dimension of your social and private behavior, what to say, what to think, what to believe, and how to behave, then religion is just prescribing a standardized reality, and a religious person is subscribed to the type of reality that their religion offers. When you subscribe to a certain belief system, you often invest your entire life into it. In the case of religion, your whole existence, in life and in death. Therefore, the belief systems have to be perceived as true, because life would be wasted if you subscribed to the wrong one. As a result, people and authorities turn to history to explain the present, justify their actions, and maintain a coherent narrative of their past. In religion, stories of the creation of the world, Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, Moses, and Jesus are told extensively in the Bible. These stories are also depicted in art, such as in Da Vinci's The Last Supper, all to create a coherent and standardized narrative of our existence. However, history, whether accurate or not, is told by certain people who often hold power over what they convey and can influence how it is presented, consciously or unconsciously. For example, the Europeanization and Americanization of the Bible have made Christianity appear as an all-white affair. As a result, Jesus, Moses, and other biblical heroes are often depicted in movies, art, and other media as white, despite being born in the Middle East. Even God is depicted as white. In American education, schools have for years taught a distorted and sometimes inaccurate version of history. White cowboys were depicted as heroes, indigenous people as villains, and slavery was minimized as a minor scratch rather than acknowledged as a deep, permanent scar. This narrative overlooked the roles of important black figures like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, while praising founding fathers like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson without mentioning that both owned slaves. Benjamin Franklin's prejudice towards Native Americans also went unmentioned, and many students were unaware that slavery was the central cause of the Civil War. As of fall 2022, 25 states in the US passed 64 laws standardizing what students can learn. These laws limit what educators can teach about race, racism, and American history. For example, Florida's Stop Woke Act prohibits teaching that causes students, particularly white students, to feel personal responsibility, guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress, promoting a fictitious history and diminishing the barbaric consequences of slavery and other inhuman events. Despite that, humans recognize the benefits of standardization and standardize where they see fit, mostly for their own benefit. We standardize the sockets of light bulbs, the letters on keyboards, and use English as the main mode of global communication. This allows us to communicate on a larger scale, changing our physical reality and paving the way for globalization. Globalization is a process of integrating many fields such as economy, politics, and technology. It brings the world into a small village by breaking down borders between countries, allowing the flow of technology, knowledge, economies, values, and ideas across borders. In the context of politics, globalization, in a sense, is creating a form of world government that regulates relationships among governments and guarantees rights arising from social and economic globalization. It's a way for people across the world to commit to agreed standards and values like democracy, human rights, and economic prosperity. We agree on these values and believe that they are beneficial. So many countries strive to reach global standards to meet the expectations of the countries that promote these values. However, due to the strong economies of the US and other Western countries, they significantly influence globalization. They project their worldviews and standards onto others, such as approaches to human rights and the characteristics of a developed country, thereby changing global politics. It's true that globalization has made it easy to share cultures worldwide, but many developing countries are imitating the cultures of developed countries like America and Europe. Now, when we look at the United Nations, we see a classic example of political globalization. At first glance, this may seem good because the organization aims to maintain peace and security and prevent future wars. However, the UN can be biased. They prioritize the strategic interest and political motives of the permanent members, particularly evident in humanitarian interventions like protecting the oil-rich Kuwaitis in 1991 when Iraq occupied it, contrasting sharply with the inadequate response during the Rwandan genocide in 1994. The permanent members also hold veto power, which can cripple any possible UN armed or diplomatic response to a crisis, even if the majority of countries support intervention. This arrangement has led many to view democracy within the UN as nearly non-functional, given the unreasonable influence controlled by a few, which some perceive as archaic and unjust. Standardization in many ways is significantly valuable to us, but it also comes with many forms of criticism and condemnation. Standardization is generally developed for statistically frequent events, so it is too simplistic to account for abnormal or rare events. When creating standards for the non-standard world, we risk losing all the world's diversity. Standardization also sees heterogeneity and variation as inherently undesirable that should be eliminated. However, it clashes with the real-world properties of complex systems, the law of requisite variety, the principle of equifinality, and the principle of multifinality. Standardization has the ability to make everyone alike, and this is seen as undesirable, with many organizations and individuals favoring difference rather than alikeness. If everyone is doing the same thing and all companies and states are organized the same way, how can we learn better ways from each other? Will there be room for innovation? Also, can we trust the ones who set those standards? Do we know if the standards are created for their own benefit or for ours? We can see some standards that are leading to poor solutions. For example, the red-green color of traffic lights is not a particularly good combination since colorblind people find it hard to distinguish. Or consider the letters on your keyboard, initially designed to prevent type bars from jamming, an issue no longer relevant today. Yet, the standard persists. Can you imagine how many of the irrelevant standards are there with us? Standards are invented things, and like all inventions, they are created to solve problems of an era that the society, institutions, technologies, and ambitions of the time and place. Also, things change over time, which presents a challenge to standardization efforts. Speaking about time, let's go back to the metric system. A century after its establishment, many nations adopted this system, basing its units on nature and Earth's measurement. However, scientists began to worry that relying solely on Earth's dimension wasn't enough. In 1870, James Clerk Maxwell worried that the Earth's contraction due to cooling or expansion from meteorite impacts could alter its shape, and with it, the meter. This is crucial since consistent units of measurement are the foundation of the scientific method. Any change in the metric system would render any scientific method useless since you can't repeat experiments, risking our understanding of the world on this shaky foundation. So, they sought higher ground. Instead of using the Earth as the basic defining unit, they decided to use the constants of nature, things that were thought to be unchanging throughout the universe. There's G for gravitational constant, C for the speed of light, and H for Planck's constant, which represents the smallest action that can be taken by a photon. These constants secure the definitions of the meter, the second, the ampere, the Kelvin, the mole, and the candela. The kilogram was the last unit to undergo this treatment, even though it has mysteriously been losing weight over time. At last, in May 2019, the kilogram was redefined using an intricate machine utilizing quantum physics that resulted from decades of research by labs around the world called the cable balance. The balance uses scales that weigh mass against an electromagnetic force that can be measured extremely accurately since it uses Planck's constant, allowing it to measure the smallest possible physical action. It stands as a remarkable feat of engineering and a testament to human ingenuity. However, it can't fulfill the mantra for all people for all time because there are only a few labs that can correctly wield a cable balance. So, due to this dependence on technology, it removes the units of measurement from public ownership, just like the use of the King's Foot did. Historically, the use of artifacts or units led to issues of power and authority. If you control the artifact, you control the unit, and with it, a slice of reality. The use of natural constants, like the Planck's constant, indeed removes this problem. But putting it at the forefront of technology and depending on the people who supervise it limits access to it. Standardization is important and beneficial in many ways. After all, a lot of the things you enjoy now are partly the result of standardization, and it strives to achieve good things, like the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. However, the nature of our complex world makes it hard to be applied everywhere, especially when we think that everyone is the same and that everything is simple. Standardization lacks specificity and possesses an almost magical wishful thinking quality, as if it is universally good in itself. But it depends. So, we must ask ourselves, what should be standardized? At what level? By whom? And for what purpose? These questions can improve the specificity of the standards and will probably lead to a better use of standards. Thank you for watching. Sorry for not posting anything for a month. I was so busy with college. And since this is my last semester, my course went crazy with all the assignments and work, and I had to do a lot. For the most part, it was pretty fun, but it's also exhausting, especially when you want to do your best, but your group doesn't, so you ended up doing their work. Now, I'm on my study week, and the final examination is coming, so I have to study. But I can also use the time to make this video. That's why you're watching this. But don't worry, I still study. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you next time.